good feeling to be a part of the continuity from one generation to another generation. And, you know, it makes, I think, us feel very, very good to continue the legacy that our parents, my mother and father, started as pioneers in African tourism. And they were the first tour operators in North America to bring groups to West Africa. So true pioneers they were in 1957 when they brought that first group here to Ghana shores.
In 1955, the year that Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus, Freddie and Jake Henderson opened a small travel agency in Atlanta.
We were in the heart of the South, just next door to Alabama, in Georgia, considering opening a travel agency when we couldn't even not only ride in a decent seat in the bus, we couldn't stay in the hotels, eat in the restaurants, or ride on the reserved train seats.
Today, the 4 Henderson children continue to work either part-time or full-time in the family business.
Come and join. Yeah. Join the crowd. I will do that. We'll get you all's food right away. Coming up? Yes. If I look at the family over 2 generations, I think of a company that exists as an institution, that has roots, and that has a history, and a future, Henderson Travel really helped build demand for tourism to Africa. During that whole Black consciousness time of the 60s and 70s, we were really in the vanguard of taking people to Africa, back to their roots.
We've certainly experienced our ups and our downs. You know, I mean, the disappointments are there. Make no mistake about it. But you know that there are those around you who encourage you and who have faith in you so you can get back up and start all over again.
We're all intertwined, you know, with the business. And there's probably never a time when we're all together when the business is not discussed in some capacity, you know. And it's been that way from my very early years.
Freddie Henderson was a fashion designer and professor at Spelman College.
I really began promoting travel in 1953. I decided to take a group of fashion designers to Europe to see behind the scenes. I came back and told my husband that I thought more black people would travel if they knew how easy it was to travel, you know, in Europe, whereas in the USA, because that was just still in the 50s, and segregation was still the law of the land.
Well, I was very sympathetic. Immediately it struck me right straightforward that this is a beautiful, beautiful potential, and that all what it needs was leadership to get it cranked up and get it moving.
Freddie eventually left teaching to concentrate on the agency, while Jake split his time between his housing management positions and the travel business. The business began to grow, assisted, ironically, by segregation.
There were large organizations. The white organizations said professional, fraternal, and the like, and there was a black counterpart for everyone. All of them had a large convention once a year. We decided that we offered post-convention tours.
They were not only the first African-American owned travel agency, but also the first travel agency, black or white, to pioneer in tourism development in Africa.
They took the approach of appreciating the culture and the people, not just going to see the animals, which is the only travel that people were doing to Africa at that time.
The business was always there, and it was sort of like another member of the family because it was taking so much attention. And as our children were coming along, we decided to see about utilizing their capabilities and also giving them an interest in the business. But we also saw that travel could widen their horizons so that they could do other things.
We've all chipped in at various times. We've all worked there. And I worked full-time in the agency for 5 years myself.
Shirley Henderson Coleman is the youngest of Jake and Freddie's 4 children. She is Associate Director of Grants for the National Black Arts Festival.
Well, I came quite a bit behind the others. And Consequently, Mom and Dad used to take me over to the office quite a bit because there would be no one at home. And I used to just hang around there, so they said, well, we might as well put you to work. So I started stamping brochures, so I would get 25 cents an hour, I think, for stamping brochures, of which there were always tons coming in, you know, daily. And before I became a teenager, I started traveling with my mother. When I was 11, I got to start traveling the world at a very early age, which was a real blessing. And even now, though I'm not working in the business full time, I sometimes take time off and lead tours.
When my parents first started the business, I was about 13 or 14 years old. There was a great deal of time that all of us spent in the business.
Carol Henderson Tyson is a cultural anthropologist and the eldest sister. She heads the Caribbean desk at the U.S. Agency for International Development.
We were up in the summer times until 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, doing tasks that had to be done in order to get a tour out, for example. We wrote tickets. We dittoed. These were the days with the ditto machine. We dittoed papers. We stuffed envelopes. We wrote envelopes. We went to the post office. We did absolutely everything. And by we, I mean the entire family. We were concerned with every single detail of the preparations for the trip. That conversation might lead us into other conversations as well about the country, about the leadership of the country, about the history of the country. I think that affected each and every one of us, and to some extent even goes farther to the next generation. All of us are engaged and have always been engaged in international activities.
Probably around the time I was 16, I led my first tour group out of the country. And that was the beginning of that phase where generally every summer I would lead a tour group to Europe or to Africa or to some little island in the Caribbean.
Gaynell Henderson Bailey is president of Henderson Travel Service and Henderson Associates in Washington, D.C.
It was definitely family that drew me back to the family business. This was definitely a business that I had identified in growing up that I didn't want to be in, quite frankly, because it was just so hectic and frantic and very little return in terms of the bottom line. But after graduating from college and going on and working on a couple of graduate degrees and working on my own for several years, you know, I think I did become a little wiser enough to recognize that what my mother and father had done in starting this agency and continuing to operate it for so many years was very important. So I decided I'd get involved in the family business, but I also planned from the very beginning to diversify.
After earning a law degree, Jake Henderson Jr. joined the Marine Corps during the Vietnam War.
This was the last location of the business in Atlanta. This was the fifth office that we occupied here. It's closed now. It's been closed about 2 years. The closing coincided with the retirement of my parents from the business.
Jake Jr. has been the volunteer director of Atlanta's African Business Development Center since the Atlanta office of Henderson Travel shut down.
In all honesty, after I got out of the Marine Corps, I was planning on working for the Securities Exchange Commission. My sister was getting married down here. This is in January of 1970. And I came down for the wedding, and my father said he had a problem. A little emergency had come up, and could I stick around for another week before I went on about my way? I said, sure, I wouldn't mind. When that was over, he asked me to stick around for 2 more months. And it seems like I stuck around ever since then.
My mother was always the main person involved in marketing. And my father and my brother were more in the accounting and finance sector, but more and more Jake began to manage the overall business these last few years.
During the 80s, the business faltered with the local community's economy. In 1991, the family decided collectively to close the Atlanta office.
People simply weren't traveling much. And at the same time, the airline industry required more intensity in the negotiations with them because of the heightened competition. Plus, age was a factor with my parents, who were, of course, the primary force in this operation down here.
The decision was prompted by a costly and unsuccessful attempt at expansion, complicated by embezzlement of agency funds by a non-family financial manager.
It was pretty devastating to our business, but, you know, we managed to bounce back. We lost some time, probably lost a little ground, but we survived it. And we're taking it on to the next level.
It's almost a natural waxing and waning, in a sense, as the business moved from one generation to the next. Again, there was always the thought that my parents wanted the business to move from one generation to the next, but they never said that sibling number 2, number 3, number 1, number 4, on X date, we will transfer the business from ourselves to the next generation. It was not that planned, as indeed the development of the company was not that planned.
Henderson Associates in Travel, how may I direct your call?
I really began this office as a branch of Henderson Travel Service in Atlanta, and that was in 1984. I knew nothing about the administrative side of the travel business, so I literally learned on the job through very close long-distance telephone communications with my mother and father.
It is a service business that we're dealing with, and the assets aren't fixed assets. They're not computers, they're not cars, they're not any kind of machinery. Basically, it's the expertise that you acquire. The expertise is the asset.
Around 1987, I decided to apply for my own separate corporation so that I could take advantage of some other opportunities, namely competing for federal government travel accounts and to develop a management consulting division in what's called a set-aside market, or market for minority contractors. In order to do that, it was much easier for me to be a separate corporation here because of the lengthy and very detailed application process.
Well, I suppose the first thing about a family business that you have to have is you have to have a family, and it's only because of the basic values within the family that the people in the family can work together. So the question of ownership, for example, is largely not a question that's of any importance because it really depends on the circumstances. And I suppose that the value of having someone around you that you can trust is that you simply can trust them.
My initial investment was $3,000 or $4,000, and today we're now, I guess, approximately $3.5 million. And we're not only specializing in travel services as Henderson Travel Service, but I'll also do management consulting and conference management as Henderson Associates. All of my sisters and brother, they all serve as members of the board of directors. They're all, on call to help out in any way, especially when I travel. Often Jake will operate as manager, come up from Atlanta and actually stay here and manage the office in my absence. Carol, being right here in Washington, is always readily available, especially when I'm not here. She's much more actively involved as well. We've really been a family that has always been able to talk through differences. What we do is generally everyone will express an opinion, and we, through consensus, really, will come to a decision peacefully. We have not definitely developed succession plans. That's one of the balls that's still up in the air. But I'm sure that over time, what I'd like to do is focus on succession plans.
Gaynell's son, Chaka Long, is one of several cousins in the third generation.
I really didn't become aware of how much the business meant to my family until I was in 6th grade when I saw open the Ebony magazine and I saw an article on my grandparents. I know it had to be just very hard for them to bring their business up to what it is because of just how the situations were back in 1955. That makes the business mean so much to me because I know my grandparents tried so hard, so hard trying to bring that business up then because that was a very bad time.
I think they don't recognize how much they've given us, but they've given us so much. Wow. I don't even believe I'm getting emotional, but I can't even express it, They've given us so much, and I guess I'm crying because I think that they feel frustrated and feel that they haven't given us enough. But what they've given us is priceless.